My name is Tiffany, and I am an electrical engineering major, and I am here representing on behalf of ECUH, which is the Engineers Council at the University of Hawaii, and I currently serve as the president.
Hi, my name is Andrea. I am a junior majoring in electrical engineering at the University of Hawaii, and I serve as the VP of IT in the Engineering Council.
All right, to start us off, we would like to ask to all of our panelists, first question, could you tell us about your background in engineering or any experience you've had in that area? And we can start from the right.
Okay. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
Different mic? Hello? Hello?
Oh, this is switch.
Can everyone hear us? It's a pretty small room.
Oh,
Hello? Hello?
That's for the video.
Oh, for the video. Hi everyone, I'm Andrew. I am a software engineer by trade. I've been working as a software engineer for the last 7 years, mostly working in JavaScript and Python. And I mainly work in backend development. And I've worked at startups ranging from like 50 people to right now like 250 people. So relatively small, but not super early stage.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you all. My name is Eric Tam. I'm a co-founder of Ebvia, which was started in 2020 to develop COVID therapeutics. I also lead business development at a company called Grant Engine. We help early stage biotech and medtech companies raise non-dilutive funding through government contracts and grants. Depending on how you do the accounting, we've helped many biotech companies raise over $1 billion and work with about 200 biotech companies every year. But I'm more on the business side of things, as has been my background. So happy to talk to different points about job searches, fundraising, thinking about businesses from an early stage and different stages of a startup's life cycle, and whatever everyone's interested in. But really pleased to be here. Coming from California, but I've been in Hawaii for 4 years now, and kind of like the quick note of why I was interested in coming to UH and meeting with some of you folks was I think it's a good way of advancing your career when you can hear from people in different industries. And I was fortunate enough to have a series of mentors going through college and in early parts of my career that showed me different pathways to figuring out what made sense and what didn't. And happy to be here and sharing some of that with all of you. Eddie?
I think I have my own.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Hello, kako everyone. My name is Eddie Ontai, President of DataHouse Consulting. We are a local-based consulting firm, been around for nearly 50 years, and actually share a little bit of a data point with a company you might be familiar with, Microsoft, incorporated in the same year in 1975. That's kind of where we parted ways, though. But anyway, my background is not in engineering as well. I'm actually training as a CPA and worked in management consulting for a number of years, worked in nonprofits, actually worked in affordable housing development, and now I manage a company that does software development. There's a lot of different roles in software development or any kind of technology development, so happy to share some of those roles and where that might be of interest for many of you.
So following on that, what motivated you to choose a career in IT, or what inspired you into going into a company like DataHouse?
Good question. So I didn't choose IT. I'd like to say it chose me. So prior, this is probably a little bit of a longer story for a short question. Prior to working for DataHouse, I was actually working in the nonprofit sector for at least a decade. And that was preceded that I was in accounting and consulting. But I really got to understand, the whole business of a nonprofit and, how that correlates to entrepreneurship and startups. When you're working in a nonprofit, it's very much like a startup because you don't make a lot of money. So you have to be super resourceful and super creative and scratch and claw for every penny to be able to apply towards, in a nonprofit's case, your mission. How I evolved from there, it was basic, I couldn't afford to have a family on a nonprofit salary. So I decided to go back into the private sector. Just so happened to paying up a relationship I had for many years. And just based on my background and experiences, they asked me to join DataHouse and eventually lead it. So I think there's a lot of different skills and experiences that you can apply to practically any industry, especially now that technology has evolved so much, where industries, there's a kind of a blurry line between them now. Yeah.
On the conversation of individual backgrounds, we'll also move on to Eric. What initially drew you to life sciences and what motivated you to take this skill set into the startup environment?
Yeah, maybe before, is everyone here an engineering student? Could you guys raise your hands? A couple at other schools too? Business,
Computer science.
computer science, good. And life sciences, oh, perfect. That's my audience. And how many of you are in your third and fourth years? Okay, so most everyone. Are you guys looking to stay on the island and get jobs here, or thinking about starting a business?
Starting a business.
Wonderful.
Start my business.
Wonderful. Great. Just wanted to ask, so we have a sense of who we're talking to and how we can be helpful. Really quickly on my background, I'd always been interested in startups. My first one was a clean tech startup in college. We were top 40 college startups on one of Forbes' list. I've been thinking about fundraising and how you finance startups really since I've been a senior, junior in college myself. Very quickly in college, I found out that the biggest rate limiter of success very often is, after you have a product concept, it's being able to hire people and talent to build it. And to do that, you need money. And so I spent a large portion of my career figuring out how to fundraise, how to meet investors, and do business development and network as a way of problem solving for working on my own ventures. And the first company that I really started was Ebvia. I did so with my dad, who's been a long time biotech entrepreneur himself. He previously ran a public company called Visionaries as president and COO. During that time, he raised $500 million in corporate funding and got 4 drugs approved. And so I've been very lucky to learn about early stage startups and fundraising and drug development from him. Among one of my other mentors, the current CEO of Grant Engine, where I lead business development. He's been a life sciences VC. Earlier in his career, has started multiple companies, sold and exited 4 of them. And so these are some of the people that have trained me to work on startups and think through different things that you go specifically at the earliest stages. Think pre-seed, seed, Series A. But that's a long-winded intro. I got interested in life sciences. I think the mission is noble. Most people who are the scientists or on the business side of things are in the industry because they want to save human lives. And so around that, there's a giant industry that runs clinical studies and finances these projects. And so that's generally where I've participated for the last 8 or 9 years or so. But Andrew? Sorry.
So you mentioned a lot about mentorship. How did you go about finding those mentors to help you on your pathway, like into your industry or research or your connections?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Do we want to do Q&A at the end?
Yeah, we have a Q&A at the end. So
Okay, so hold on to that. Yeah.
Great question.
That's good. Thank you for sharing how you got into life sciences. I feel like you kind of had the path set when you were in college. But for Andrew, did you ever consider doing a business startup, or did you always know that you wanted to go into software engineering?
Personally, I grew up in a very immigrant household where stability was kind of key. So with that, I decided to go into computer science and become a software engineer because at the time, it was a very steady industry with a lot of money in it. In terms of starting my own business, I think I dabbled the idea. Eric's actually tried to recruit me to implement some of his ideas, but we haven't actually got there yet. I feel like at the time I wanted to prove myself and develop the skills first before I launched myself into the unknown and build a company. But I don't think that's necessarily the correct way or the only way to do it. Anyone can actually start a company if they have the right idea and the right drive.
On the topic of all of your journeys, we want to move on to career journeys and entrepreneurship in each of your perspectives. So the first question to all of you, and you can pass down the mic, is how did your background influence your path into entrepreneurship?
So, again, I work for an IT consulting firm, so we're a pretty established business. But we belong to a parent company that has a family of companies under it, and we've had a number of startups that we've tried to start, and manage. So I do have a perspective on there. I think from that perspective, our DNA is ultimately very entrepreneurship. So it doesn't matter if you're an established company or you're trying to start up or you're maybe in Series C funding or in the startup phase. It really comes to kind of that ethos per se, your perseverance, your focus, your determination, and then also how open-minded you are in terms of receiving feedback. Because the reality is it's a very complicated and very tough business for a startup. As Eric was mentioning, fundraising is a big part of that and getting the capital. And it's a totally different discipline than building the product, let alone thinking of the idea of the product. And by the way, it's not really a product that you're trying to start up, it's a business that you're trying to start up, which is a whole different thing. So it's really understanding all of those different moving parts and being open-minded enough, having the agility, perseverance, and all the other attributes that really go into, I would say, what makes for a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, those are nice points. I'd also reiterate the point around a business versus a product. A business, put very simply, is a product or service that people want, that you transact value when you give it to others. It's that simple. And so, generally speaking, when you think about your careers, you fall on one of those two sides of the spectrum with respect to venture-funded companies or engineering type roles at companies. People that are in roles like engineering, design, they tend to fall on the product side. And then for folks in business development, sales, marketing, and other functions, those are on the business side. And the general purpose of the business side is to capture value from the product. And so when you think about what you want to do, and when you think about the different problems that are in markets or ideas for products, you can't just think of what that idea is. You have to think of a way of selling it and a way of creating a market and a process to market those products and sell those products. And so, because there are so many different things along the learning curve, the kind of where I start when I talk to folks who are interested in starting companies is you really want to try to create some amount of a competitive advantage for yourself in your own profile, on your resume, as you're starting out in your career and getting your first set of internships and early jobs. Because what that does is it tells people in your network that you're serious, that you're committed to working on a specific industry and problem set. And as you learn about those industries and the different types of things that you can do and navigate, you get better at networking and coming up with ideas that solve different problems in those areas. And so I think the lesson that I like to start with is when you're thinking about starting a company as opposed to starting a business, going after a job, the fact of the matter is that most companies fail. In life sciences or drug development, 1 in 5,000 drugs gets approved. And similarly for tech companies, even if you raise a seed round, even if you raise a Series A round, it's very likely that that company hiring great talent, having great business plans will fail. And so you have to be able to put yourself in a position to outcompete and to get more shots on goal, so to speak. And the way that you do that is by building up your own experience, hearing about what others are doing, and always thinking critically about what ideas and what markets are emerging and coming out, and figuring out if you have some interesting angle to approach it with. I guess I'll stop there.
So you mentioned one of like the most important things is to raise money during like the pre-seed stage. So for like all the technical entrepreneurs, what do you think are essential skills that they need to have in order to communicate like the complex technical problems that they have to investors or stakeholders that have no background in engineering?
Generally speaking, it really depends, what industry that you're in. So for software plays in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, the general composition of a co-founding team will be a person with a technical background. Likely they will have some experience from another company as a software engineer or leading a team of software engineers in that specific market. So maybe Andrew can talk a little bit about that. But then on the other side, there will be, a business person that will be responsible for sales, marketing, generally doing a lot of the fundraising. And that's something that, at least with Silicon Valley, they've come to expect out of founding teams. But that being said, as a technical person, there's a lot to benefit from developing the skill sets that a business side person would have, understanding sales, understanding how to network with people, how to have a conversation. I would love to get into some of those points later, but I think I'm talking a lot. So,
I think for the pre-seed round, a lot of times you're not going to have a product when you're actually looking for funding. More if you're selling like the idea and the fit that or the market fit that you might think is there. So you don't really have to communicate like the highly technical details, but it is helpful to have like a technical person on board that can tell you the limitations of like what you're trying to build and the technical difficulties of what you're going to encounter, how long it's going to take. But yeah, I think overall when you're trying to look for seed funding, it's more the idea and the team that you're building together to actually implement the idea that they're going to be investing in.
Can I add to that? So, bring it down to your level, right? You're still trying to figure out, these skills that I'm developing or gaining from my education, whether it be in computer science or computer engineering or business finance, right? As an entrepreneur, you want to leverage those skills, and the more skills you have, the more valuable you as an individual contributor will bring to the table. I'm always envious of these engineers because I'm not one, because they can build stuff, right? They can build stuff out of virtual air. But I do have skills too. I can read financial statements. I can communicate and build presentations, right? And form a narrative that's consumable understanding to an audience. But the reality is you want to look at building those skills, and the more skills you have that complement each other, whether it be engineering, I can build stuff, whether it be finance, I can do pro forma spreadsheets, whether it be marketing, I can actually create a campaign, right? Those are all necessary skills, and the more you have as an individual, the more valuable you are as a contributor. But that doesn't mean that that's all you have. You want to bring someone, you want to complement your team. If you're going to start a company or a team, you want to have people that are bringing applicable skills that are valuable to the overall model, business model.
Yeah, and if I could add just a couple more notes on fundraising. So when you fundraise at any different stage, who you talk to, the type of investor that you talk to is going to be very different. For most venture-funded plays or businesses, that first pre-seed or angel round, you're going to be talking to people in your network, ideally mentors that want to invest in you. You think the VPs at the companies that you work at, that one neighbor that made a lot of money selling a company, and in that stage, pre-idea, before you have sort of like a business that's been validated, there's not going to be as high of a demand to explain technical concepts, and I think that's generally true across most tech, biotech, and venture-funded businesses. But as soon as you get to what I usually think of as like a real product building round, or a seed, like an institutional seed round, institutional just meaning you're getting funding from a venture capital firm, which everyone knows what a venture capital firm is. Basically just a conglomeration of people that have a skill set and then ask others for money and then invest that money into startups. But when you approach these institutional investors, that's when you need to have a very robust operating and technical plan. And so for the folks that are coming from, engineering backgrounds, the best people that you really want to start thinking about and learning from are those that are in engineering manager roles and VPs of engineering, because what they do in their day-to-day is they're thinking about how a company is aligning their strategic priorities with people on the ground and how they are moving a roadmap towards building those products. And that's the type of detail that generally investors are going to want to see, at least at a reasonably level, especially if you're a young person. If you're someone who's sold a company for $1 billion, usually you can call someone and say, hey, I want to do something, and you're going to get that check. But for first-time entrepreneurs or people who haven't been through a fundraising process or haven't built a company before, you're going to have to work that much harder in order to create those relationships and prove to somebody that you are worth investing in, and that you have the salt and the discipline and the patience to build a company and win a market.
Yeah, the funding side of the industry is a very small network of folks. They all kind of know each other, and so the relationships are very tight knit. Even like if you look in our own community here in Hawaii, right, with the banks, very close. Everyone knows everyone. There's like 2 degrees of separation. So that's also an asset that you can bring. If someone in your team has those relationships, that is an asset. That's a resource.
So like, what advice would you give someone that's just starting? Like, they're not even in the pre-seed stage. They're just like thinking about it, but they only have technical skills. They like don't have a team. Like, what kind of advice would you give to them?
It's all about the ideation at that point, right? Like, you have to be thinking of the market that you're trying to hit, the problem that you're trying to solve, and how you can use technology to actually solve that problem. So once you actually have an idea and you've like pondered on it, you thought of like different scenarios, you look at the market, you start researching about like, how much money can you actually make in this area. Then you can start like looking for, if you only have technical skills, maybe you can start looking for a business like co-founder, someone who actually rounds out your abilities, so you can have more like cohesive team tackling this project and start bringing it to life.
Yeah, I would say, one of the first things that I started doing prior to getting into early stage companies was I tried to develop a decision-making framework of how I think about different ideas. And so some of the things that, you often hear about, people having a back of the envelope analysis, or in other words, a quick and dirty way of coming to a decision on something that's important. For a business, it needs to align with your skill set. You need to have a certain set of resources. The key resources that anybody starts a company with are time being the most important thing. And so I'm 30. I just got married. Likely I'm going to have kids at some point. And so I have a certain amount of time where I don't have kids to work on the things that I want to work on, and then that'll shift a little bit after that happens. But time is your first resource. Second resource is money. So when you're a student, unless you guys are Bill Gates' kids or something, likely you're gonna have to get a job after school. And so every time that you think about starting a company, you're thinking in 5-year periods or longer. And so what you have to do is, one, have a backup plan and contingency around having a parallel career for many cases, because if 9 out of 10 folks are not getting past a fundraising round, at some point you may have to enter back into the job market. And so thinking about your finances, these are all different factors that go into evaluating a business idea, without even getting into how you think about the business or the market itself. You think about competitors, you think about what that product or service, for me at least, what good it's going to do in the world. You certainly have to think about profitability and whether or not such an idea can actually make money. There's a lot of really great ideas. Like, if I could hand out free airplane tickets to everybody, everyone would sign up immediately, but you're never going to be able to make money doing that. And so becoming confident about how you analyze different ideas and different plays is going to be really key to putting yourself in a position to confidently act on a business idea as you develop it. But without having a framework to kind of weigh different opportunities, it's going to be very difficult for you to make a decision on some of those things. But I think the last thing that I would add to that is, in school, you go through a process where a teacher instructs you how to do something. You read from a textbook, and then you get tested on it. It's very different in the market and the way that you learn about things, generally speaking. If there's a business idea that's worth a large market, usually it's the first time that that's being done. And that means that nobody thus far has really had a good answer to that problem set. And so the only way to find out is to go out there and try, have conversations with people, talk to people in the know, and just experiment yourself as an engineer on what can actually be done, and cultivating that mentality of doing it as opposed to analyzing it or worrying is something that's been very critical for me to move along in my journey. Otherwise, I would have just been stuck in analysis paralysis, not doing anything. And there's always a million reasons to say no to something, but you always want to look for people that are the one person that says, yes, if we do this, and maybe we can get it done. But those people are always going to be worth more than the people that say no.
Yeah, I mean, I think starting off, obviously, you don't have a lot of experience, you don't have a lot of resources. You may still be developing that one skill or developing a second skill. So there's the probabilities of success are a little lower, right? Unless you had all those resources. But at the same time, you still got to take the same steps, kind of what Eric was saying, having that framework, you still got to follow the same framework. Because at the end of the day, the reason why there's so many failures is probably because a lot of those folks that failed didn't have a framework. They just started, and hopefully they thought, by chance, I'll be successful. But the reality is, that's not how business works. You have to kind of check all the boxes to make sure that you're doing the right things. And at the end of the day, even if you do, there's still a probability that you may not be successful. But what you're doing is you're increasing your probability to be successful. So it's really about, from my perspective, managing your risk and knowing what resources that you're bringing to the table that's going to increase that level of success and probability, right? But being that you're young and you don't have a lot, or you don't have a lot to lose, the best thing to do is just start, right? That's how you learn, because you're going to learn from iterations. That's the whole concept of agile development is iterate, and you'll learn from that. But have a good systematic feedback loop that's going to take that lesson learned and make an improvement. I mean, we just heard about SpaceX, right? They just launched Super Rocket again, and again, it was not totally successful in the end game, but they made an improvement, and they're on that trajectory to eventually go to the Mars, right?
On the topic of risks, right? How can students think about calculated risks in startups, and what are the key factors in evaluating winning products and teams?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As in any big market, like if you're talking about billion-dollar companies and larger, or trillion-dollar companies, at every level, you're going to be faced with severe competition from large incumbents. So, for example, almost any software idea that you could have that could get funded, you're going to be competing with Google, Meta, and all of the other, Microsoft, all of the other tech companies that have effectively infinite people and infinite budget to go after. And so that's why, as Eddie was saying, cultivating the skills and the resources and the network that you have to very quickly and effectively go after a problem set is really key. Calculated risk. I like to think. Does anyone play poker? Well, it's gambling. It's like calculated risk is really gambling, and so, for example, in a job search, right? If you think, what do you think are the odds of you landing a job at Google? If you think your odds are 100%, then you only need to apply once, or a job of that caliber. But I think most people would say that's quite unreasonable. And so when you go through a job search or when you go through starting a business, you always want to think about, at least the way I think is, there's an odds likelihood of success of any type of activity or thing that you're trying to accomplish. And so, a quick primer on sales. Sales is basically a funnel of opportunities that slowly get closer to closing and transacting. And so if you're trying to hit a target, for example, of $10 million in a quarter, you hope that one sale will get you to that. But for every business that is trying to meet sales targets, what they do is they market to a very broad audience of their potential customers. So the number of shots on goal, and then they invest a small amount of resources, their bet size, by paying people to sell that product and to interact with those potential customers. And as opportunities go through that funnel, eventually they close some of that business. And so that concept of needing to have multiple shots on goal, depending on how risky of an endeavor that you're approaching, is really important to being reasonable or reasonably able to believe that you have a shot at doing the hard thing that you're trying to do.
So on the product development area, how would you balance the building the prototype quickly rather than making it design it to scale or future growth?
I think when you're first starting out, speed is really the name of the game. You should be aiming for scalability, but that shouldn't stop you from or slow you down from building the actual product that you can demo and present to investors, or just to share with the public and get actually feedback on it. Scalability can always be worked in later through refactoring or putting more man hours into migrating the product into different languages or different structures or different different systems. But overall, I think in the very beginning, it's all about speed. So making sure that you get something working as soon as possible so you can prove out your concept.
Yeah, I think prototyping is so important because you're trying to sell the idea. And so you don't have to even have the whole thing baked out. You can just have a very, very fancy front end and you just power it through on the back end with someone doing something on the back end somewhere else.
Live demos.
That's what demos are all about. I mean, we do that in the consulting when we're called to demo our solution, our product, or our offerings to clients. Because again, going back to the other question of calculated risk, why would you spend all that money for something that you don't know if they're going to buy, right? That doesn't make sense unless you have a limitless amount of resources and money and people. Would you do that? But even then, that's not very wise, right? It's not very prudent. So you just want to spend enough to get the idea across to make sure that you can prove your hypothesis that your solution is solving a problem that people are willing to buy. All right? The buy part is a really important piece. Just because you think it's solving a problem doesn't mean people will buy it. It's got to add value to them, to the prospective buyer, right? The scaling part from a build standpoint, that's if you're talking about that before you even got the initial product market fit, right? You're probably say, there's a saying, getting ahead of your skis, but here in Hawaii, it's probably getting too far in your surfboard and you're purling, right? You're gonna fall over. You're getting way too ahead of yourself. You can solve that problem. That's a great problem to have if you have to start scaling. That means you solve the product market fit, which is a market for your product. And now you gotta scale. But you gotta first solve the fundamental problem, which is my solution solving a problem and is people willing to buy it, right? Is it adding value to them?
Yeah, to go off of some of Eddie's points, the first phase of a business or any new product that gets launched by a company is really validation. And that's true of BioTech, that's true of software, that's true of many different engineering products. And the function of that prototype at the early stage is really to be able to put something in front of a potential customer and get feedback from them where they say, yes, I want this, or it's pretty good. Maybe if you added these things or these dimensions, I would be more interested in buying it. And so prior to feeling, the goal of a prototyping stage of any company is to feel confident that the market wants what you have. And so the goal then is to come up with that idea and that concept on as little budget and as fast as possible. And so one thing that I see in the life sciences, I meet with scientists every day that sometimes spend 5 to 10 years working on a research program without having any real indication that there is a patient group or patient market for it, or talking to larger pharmaceutical companies. And so I think, one problem that I see come up pretty frequently with technical side people is they want to be very, very heads down. They want to work on something, perfect it. But really perfect in many cases, if not all cases, is perfect is the enemy of the good. And the goal is really to get an indication from the market, either through customers, if it's people buying things at a storefront, or if it's a business customer talking to businesses that would buy it, and getting to a point where you feel, yes, there's a demand for this. Yes, I have a product that is more competitive than what's out there. And once you have that, then you can start to invest more resources into building something more robust.
I'd like to move on to future outlook. So in particular, where do you see the engineering industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years? And how is your company preparing for these changes? Since we talk on the topic of how robust and how things are slowly just getting more and more advanced over time.
As you all probably know, like the AI boom is like pretty significant the last like 1 or 2 years. I imagine it's still continuing to grow. Right now, there's a lot of emphasis on like LLMs, and I see like companies in the Bay Area all leveraging it right now, whether that's just for like programmers to use in like their workflows, or actually trying to investigate how they can implement LLMs in their products. So our company has like a team of engineers that are just experimenting and trying new ways, and seeing how they can actually leverage LLMs. So I think overall LLMs aren't like this end all be all. I think we're going to continue to see evolutions in AI. So I think that's a really like booming industry, and it's all going to definitely continue to impact the technical industry.
I would answer this in a slightly different way. What gets funded and what types of businesses is always going to be different, and always is going to change year after year, and certainly depending on who you talk to and what industry that you're in. And so one thing that you can do at the early part of your career is try to have as many conversations with people that are very integrated in a startup ecosystem as much as possible. So think folks who are investing, think of people that are starting companies, groups that are like accelerators, or places like PACE, where there are hubs of entrepreneurs and folks that are starting companies, and just go around and ask them, hey, what do you see in the field? Like what are you working on, and why are you working on it? Or always be thinking about like what are interesting companies. And the reason that I point to networking as opposed to reading about something online is because all of the best information, generally speaking, at least in the life sciences, and I think many of the tech fields, is really going to be privy to a smaller population of investors and entrepreneurs that are thinking very deeply about these things and are investing their own resources into going after it. And so by the time that you've read about an analysis on LLM products, as as that's gone very popular over the last couple years. I mean, OpenAI was building their early versions of ChatGPT like close to 10 years ago, and so the people that knew about that product or that project was a very small number of Silicon Valley investors and executives at that time. Now the whole world knows about it, but in order to get access to some of these interesting trends, you really have to talk to people. You have to talk to folks like Andrew, myself, Eddie, and other professionals to hear about what do they think is interesting and what's worth learning about.
Thank you so much for all your responses. I wanted to open the panel more for the public so that I can ask questions. So yeah, I can just bring them
Yeah, thank you very much for the talk today. Yeah, I opened my mind. It's opened my mind a lot. Yeah. So I would like to ask so when we would like to ask our potential customer about do they want to use our product or not, should we also ask them about how much they are willing to pay for that? And if the potential customer say that, oh, I have no idea, I want to buy, but I have no idea what price I should pay. So what should we do? Thank you.
You're the entrepreneur. You have to try.
Yeah, price is a really sensitive data point that you need to capture as a founder or really as anybody operating on the business side. A lot of times you'll send over a proposal to somebody, and this is true, I think, more for business to business types of companies or consulting companies. If the price is not within the range of what they're able to pay, they'll
They'll
just
let you know. They'll let you know.
or they won't let you know, and they'll ignore
That's
it,
an answer.
which is an answer, absolutely.
Exactly.
And so I don't think there's any easy way of doing this besides getting a feel for one. Well, actually, so this is the quick and dirty way to do it. You pretend you're a customer and you call the competition and you say, hey, what are you selling and how much are you selling them for? And you don't tell them what you're doing, and then you price it competitively against that. That is bar none the fastest way of getting to, I think, reasonable pricing on a product. But there's a lot of considerations, and the only way that you're going to be able to come up with your pricing is one, by knowing your costs. So you can't price something lower than what it takes you to make it. And two, what is your target customer and what are they willing to pay, right? Like if I have a product that's going out to Series A startups that are bootstrapped and can't give their employees healthcare, they're not going to be able to afford a premium offering. So it really depends on who you're talking to, right? And who you're building that product for, consumer or business.
I would not ask them though. That's actually a very easy cop out. So now you're putting the problem onto your customer. You got to do the research, like what Eric was suggesting. And the other suggestion I would make is don't go in with $0 or freemium, because part of pricing is part of the experimentation of whether or not this is a good product market fit, right? You need to know that piece of the puzzle.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take it. Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. My name is Lino, and it's nice hearing you guys talk. You guys pointed out the importance of having user. It's great to have a nice idea or a great product, but again, you said user is a different topic, right? So how do you validate your product idea before launching, and what signs indicated that you were on the right track, as well as having users? How do you know that this is even a usable thing that users would want?
The simple answer is you just got to go out there and experiment, right? And get a good sample size that you're going to get some feedback that's going to tell you that, right? But that's just solving maybe the theory that this is a potential problem solution fit. So that's just, your solution is solving a particular problem, and there's a sample size that's giving you feedback. Yes, this works for me. Whether they're willing to pay for it and how much, that's another part. That's the value part. You still got to figure out. And then the next stage is going to be the product market fit. Can it scale, beyond this small sample size?
Thank you. And then to follow up with that, what marketing channels have been most successful for acquiring users, and why did you choose those as for your companies?
Yeah, I think finding fit for a marketing strategy or a product is very similar. You approach things often experimentally. You try maybe social media work, maybe email marketing will work, maybe you get a lot of business through referrals. And I think what I would say is when you try a lot of things, you absolutely see what doesn't work. You spend a lot of time doing something, and if it leads to no customers or no leads or no one buying, then that doesn't work. But I'll give an example. One of the lines of business that I lead at Grant Engine is called strategic non-dilutive funding, or these large government contracts. And so I do a lot of work with a funding agency called ARPA-H, which is part of Health and Human Services. And one marketing mode that I was able to come up with really had everything to do with timing. This agency, ARPA-H, would release these large funding programs where lots of companies would come in to access that funding. And I found that the timing of when I sent out an email one day after that conference had all the difference in terms of the response rate that I was getting for my marketing team. It went from, like 1 in 1,000 replies to, like over like a 20% reply rate. And so when you bite onto something, whether it's marketing or a product that works, as like Eddie was saying, the market will sort of tell you, and you'll know what it feels like when you have something that could work. But that's why it's very important to be, experimental, to not think too much and too hard about different things, and really be focused on pushing stuff out there and getting it done.
Thank you. And then, sorry, one last question, if that's okay. If you were in our position and you were attending the venture competition, how would you approach pitching your product to investors, and what key points would you want to focus on? Maybe one important key point to focus on.
Yeah, who's your investor? What's their background?
Good question.
No, that's the first question to ask, because what they will be thinking about is based on what they've already done. And so that's whenever you have any conversation with anybody, you have to think about where are they coming from and what are they interested in knowing. And so selling is about putting the right information in front of the right audience.
You watch Shark Tank?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Does it matter to have users for a product that you're trying to get investors for? Like, would you care to tell them about usability as well?
Well, that's part of the evidence, right?
Okay.
Because as an investor, it's like, well, how much am I willing to put my money at risk? The more evidence you have, the less risk they're going to feel.
I would also just very quickly add, I think in early business competitions, people really like how you state the problem and how well it's very much reliant on how good of a communicator you are. So if you can eloquently articulate what the problem is, that says, wow, that's something important that people ought to go after, that usually catches people's attention. And second, if you have a solution that makes sense, I think generally speaking at business competitions, they're not going to be as focused on some of the technical details of what you're doing, or perhaps even like what's the back end of your product, or what's your data structure. Like I don't think anyone's going to ask that at a business competition for the most part. Could be wrong. So take my advice, all of my advice with a grain of salt. But think about big picture stuff, right? What is the product? How can I say that in a sexy way that gets people's attention? Is it a problem that other people can be invested in? And this is why I'm the right person to do it.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more question? Yeah. Okay, we have one more question. Does anyone have? Do you have your? No? No more? Okay. No?
I can ask one more. I had a bunch. I guess we could talk about pivoting. Let's say you already had an idea. Have there been moments when you had to pivot your product, and what lessons did you learn from that experience?
I can talk a bit about the first company that I was at Hide AI. We started off with a variety of different products. One of them being this Alibaba kind of clone where we were selling stuff using AI to curate the list. I think we quickly realized that the majority of our business was leaning towards computer vision. So I was pretty shocked when we had a huge round of layoffs and got rid of a third of the company. But I can see from the strategic decisions that we made was that they weren't afraid to change what we were doing and to follow the evidence of what is better. So even though we already made so many investments into this other product, the long-term view of the computer vision side was so much greater. So it's to not be afraid of these pivots when the market and your evidence is pointing you to a different direction.
Yeah, and again, you got to listen to the feedback you're getting, particularly from your investors. So one of the examples of one of our startup companies that was focused, that they saw a problem in the in the senior population. Obviously, there's a growing demographic, right? So that was kind of the focus. How do we solve this growing population's problem of growing old and being disconnected, being in a senior care home and not, being connected with their family and caregivers, et cetera. And we built a product to connect all of that together. And one of the investors had mentioned, it was like, oh, that's interesting, but what's your market? It's, oh, it's like, you look at all the population across the country, we're talking, how many millions of people? And they were like, well, that's not super interesting, right? I want to talk hundreds of millions, right? And so that's where they actually did pivot. Originally the company was called Sagely, still in place, but they carved out, or they did an offshoot to a company called My Persona that was taking the basis of the technology and the solution and expanding it to a wider demographic based on that feedback.
All right, that concludes our panel.